Hello, everyone. My name is Rashmi Varma, and I'm here on behalf of Innovate5G. And I thank all of you guys to join us here in our second part of the series that we are discussing about CBRS. The last event, we had a big turnout here, but today being the commencement week, the audience is a little thin, but we do have folks online. So just to get started here, we are Innovate5G, and we are actually trying to bring 5G-driven business growth to the market. We know that here in the US, because of a lack of mid-band spectrum, we are at a challenging spot here. So in contrast to other 5G economies like China and Korea, we are trying to create greater 5G momentum by bringing a test network together and being able to create an ecosystem where we can incubate applications that would ride over 5G. And so with this, we are actually trying to work with other 5G economies. We are trying to bring in India at the same time, even though rollouts of major wireless advancements happen a little later there. We still want to be able to see what we can reap in terms of applications that will be developed both outside of the US and in the US. So as I said, Innovate5G will be the first pre-commercial corridor deployment for 5G digital infrastructure. This would be a purely experimental network that we want to put together and be able to find those killer applications either in the areas of healthcare, well-being and fitness, transportation, or the entertainment sector. To that effect, there are two parts to the solution that we are trying to bring in is to host that network that I was just talking about, an experimental network, and to incubate, create that innovation platform for developers. To do that, obviously, we have a big task in front of us, and we are trying to build this up using with a big partnership here, a 5-year multi-million-dollar public-private partnership between digital technology leaders such as the OEMs, academia, like places like UTD here, UNT, Texas A&M, and obviously bringing in the government entities, the FCC or what have you, as far as the policies regarding 5G and Cbrs are concerned. So that's going to be a consortium that we are putting together. And as far as Innovate5G itself is concerned, we would like to offer all the incubation services such as the mentoring, the training, validation on our test network, and then a funding network that we will bring together with this. So this is our MOU with India. We are working with an incubator set up by the Prime Minister Narendra Modi in India, also to be part of this setup here. So this is truly a multinational incubator that we are working with here. So that's about Innovate5G. I'd like to get this event started. Last event, we talked about what Cbrs is, and we had Alan Ewing, Director of Cbrs Alliance here, telling us about the different aspects of Cbrs. So we learned about Cbrs. We learned about the spectrum that has become available called the innovation band. We learned about how we access the spectrum of Cbrs using GAA and the PAL licensing. And today, for this event, we would like to focus on the use cases. Where and how would we use Cbrs? What's the value in bringing Cbrs to market? And how is this going to roll out the next trend in private wireless networks? With that, I'd like to invite my first speaker here who will be presenting some of their use cases and client pilots and projects, Swaminathan from Nokia. So Swaminathan Arunachalam, Senior Director, Customer Success from Nokia. Swami actually is a seasoned technology and sales management executive with a couple of decades of telecom experience. As head of customer success here in North America, he drives sales management to sustain mobile business growth and profitability by maximizing value towards Nokia's customers. He has pioneered several data analytics-based sales approach in Nokia. And today, I called him in because he's really passionate about the changes that are happening in the wireless network arena, especially with regards to AI, machine learning, and deep learning. So I would like to welcome Swaminathan Arunachalam here to present his take on the use cases for CBRS.
Hey.
That's the green.
Thanks, Rashmi, for the great opportunity. I've been here during the last session, and then we have been looking into the CBRS spectrum, and then how it will be useful in general. But maybe we will look into it in specific, in what all industries it will be useful. And then, how is it better than Wi-Fi? Why should the industry should look into the CBRS? So this is the aspects we will look into it. Okay, so maybe just before entering into the private wireless, let's have a quick introduction on the Industry 4.0, what we have been seeing for a while. Most of the industries have started looking into the digitalization aspect of their physical assets. If we look into the Amazon and then Apple, they have changed most of the physical into digital. For example, the banking sector and then even the logistics sectors, they have already changed into the digital. But if you see the real factories, it is really tough to change the machines or the trucks, whatever they are using it into a digital. So what they are currently focusing is, how can they create a digital twin? So what is a digital twin all about? So how can we control the machines from a digital world? And then that's what they are currently looking into it, and that's what they mean by digitalization. So we will see that how we are going to support the digitalization of the factories. So that's the Industry 4.0 speaking about, and then that's why private wireless is going to be useful in order to digitize the industries. So what is private wireless network all about? So it's a standalone LTE or a 5G network, independent of mobile operators network. So if it is a mobile operator network, it's in public wireless. If they want to have their own standalone, and then if they want to control the network, then that's going to be the private wireless. They will be building it with a localized area. If it's going to be a region, or if it is going to be more national-wide, then we'll be more moving towards a public side. So if they want to control it more in a localized area, then they would be going for a private wireless. And then that's where the private wireless will be more looking into it. And then LTE and then performance and reliability available for industrial use cases. Yes, we will look into that. So what I try to show here by industrial use cases are, it's a diverse requirements coming from industrial use cases. So one is more the remote sites, and then offshore, where we could see about oil platforms and then power plants. Those is one particular market or an industry. And then the other one is more to the logistics, where we see the ports, airports, and then harbors, how they will be able to use the private wireless. And then we also go to the next spectrum of factories, wireless, and hospitals. So this is the different industrial use cases we will be touching up few use cases in these sectors in coming slides. Okay, so in this slide, I would like to explain when should we go for a private wireless, and then when should we look into the public wireless. As I was been mentioning in the previous slide, when it is a localized area, if they want to control within their, for example, if it could be an warehouse space, or it could be an industry where it is industrial factory, it could be in square meters if they want to cover it, then that's more a private area where the enterprise could be having a dedicated wireless where they need an operational needs. So that comes on the industrial sites and the campuses. That's only for private wireless if they need to control. And then if they want to move towards the nationwide, then we need to rely on the public wireless. It doesn't make sense, for an example, if for an asset tracking, if the asset is going to be tracked across the nation, it's no point of having a private wireless. Then they need to rely on the public wireless. There, they will be going more to have a partnership with the existing CSPs, like Verizon or AT&T. They need to collaborate with, and then they need to start using the wireless network. So it's very clear that if they want to control by themselves the operations, then they will be going for a private. If not, it will be going for the public. There is in between, there are regions where there are across the campuses, if they want to handle the network, then they can go with the combination, and then they can complement both public and then private. Here, with LTE and then 5G, we have a seamless mobility. So even though if we have the factories is going to have their own network and then manage it, they can easily seamlessly move to the public network. So that's where, if you see, there is a fan for the utility companies. It's they have fan, and then even for the railways, we have been discussing there. So even in those areas, we will be having both private and then public network sharing. So that's the whole spectrum what we could see here. And then let me quickly jump onto it and then see that what is deficient in Wi-Fi. Why not we could do it with Wi-Fi, the requirements of Industry 4.0. So there are a few areas where, if you see the capacity, the Wi-Fi is having a capacity limit for each access point. And then coverage is also a few meters. And then the mobility is not seamless. If you see, even though we have 2 access points across the access points, the mobility is not really good in Wi-Fi. And then the transmissions, it requires a line of sight in most of the cases. And then we have an interference issues with the Wi-Fi. And then coexisting with PMR and then LMR with the Wi-Fi, we have interference, and then there is no IoT support with the Wi-Fi. And then looking into the security, it's high risk of hackers attacks. We would have learned about a lot of news for the power grid intrusion and all those things. That's mainly due to the Wi-Fi. Latency is also fluctuating between across the few milliseconds. The performance, if you see, it's an unstable performance, what we could see in the Wi-Fi. There are many use cases where quality of service is very important. In the industrial use cases, in the utility company, they were using an automated guided vehicles, where video is one of the important services which we needed for that. If they have all tried Wi-Fi, it's not that they have not tried the Wi-Fi. So in last 2 years, the utilities have been trying Wi-Fi to get into this Industry 4.0 use cases, but they were not being successful. So quality of service was not best class with Wi-Fi. So they are expecting a simplified and then with a good quality of service with in addition to the mobility. These are the main 3 aspects which they are looking into the Industry 4.0. Let's see in the next slide that how we will be able to support with LTE and then 5G. Okay, so here, even though we are using 5G as a private 5G, but as of now, we have private LTE. It has been commercially available. 5G, from the standards point of view, it is going to get matured only in next 2 years. So the release 16 and release 17 of 5G is what they are focusing for the ultra URLLC standards, which is going to come only in next 2020 and then 2021. So we will be focusing on private LTE, which is available now, and then we can onboard it. So here, if you see the capacity from the private LTE point of view, we have there is a possibility of 800 connections per access point. Why is that relevant? We have a lot of IoT sensors, and then there are many machines, and then the humans need to interact together. So the number of connections per access point need to be in hundreds, and then not very few with the Wi-Fi. So that's one of the important requirement, and then it has been getting satisfied with the private LTE. And then the coverage. So the radius of 30 kilometers, we are able to achieve with the private LTE. So that's one of the important factor which for the industries what they are looking for. And then the transmission it doesn't have any line of sight requirements. And then services, it is able to provide the IoT, both NB-IoT and then LTE-M capabilities it's able to provide. And then mobile broadbands with high peak rate, it is able to provide where it's able to satisfy the video requirements also. And then for the OPEX, it's really less. And then maybe there are different models when we look into the OPEX. If we go for a cloud-based model, even either the vendor or the CSPs are able to take care of the management, and then it could be even provided as a service. The QoS QoS management with prioritization is possible. That's one of the main standardization. It came with the 3GPP. So we can manage across the services. If certain mission critical services need to be prioritized, we are able to prioritize across the services within the private LTE. And then performance is a predictable data rate. And then it has a highly reliable network. So that's one of the aspect which they were missing in Wi-Fi, and then which is available here. And then mobility, it is up to 350 kilometers per hour. It's easily able to handle the mobility. Latency is below 5 milliseconds, and then with 3G, with 5G, it is going to be even less than 1 millisecond. But with LTE, we are speaking in the range of 5 milliseconds. At least 80 to 90% of the use cases what Industry 4.0 needs now, it is 5 milliseconds is enough. So most of the platforms, what they are having for the IoT and all those things, they need it is in the range of 10 milliseconds. So that also it is satisfied by private LTE. And then security is by design, right? So it's with encryption mechanisms what we have in private LTE, it's more secure. So this is more weighing why we need to look in the private LTE and then not with the Wi-Fi what we are not having. Yeah, and then here, if you see in the private wireless connectivity requirements, there are many vertical segments within the enterprises, and then each sub-segments requires a diverse network characteristics. And then even within one sub-segment, there are quite different requirements. So all these things we are able to manage and then satisfy with the private LTE. So for example, one of the manufacturing case, if you see, it is from the feature requirement point of view, it is not highly demanding, or it's not a basic, so it needs more on the mobility and then peak rate and all those things. I consider it as in feature requirements. And then going to the deployment area, mostly the manufacturing is going to be in single campus. It's not going to be a region, or it's going to be a national wide. So we are able to, private LTE is even able to handle from a localized region also to the nationwide, as in case of a public sector and then public safety use cases, what we could have seen, it is able to handle it. And then the number of BTS, or the number of users per device, is not very large. It's not like an asset tracking or a utilities use cases. It's going to be a manufacturing. The size is going to be smaller. And then it is mainly data only manufacturing use cases. So if we go for an airports or a logistics type of use cases, the requirements are really highly demanding because the video data rates will be needed is high. And then it is more on a regional level. The number of BTS is going to be large here. And then they need multiple services when it comes to the airport. So if you see across the segments, the requirements are diverse. So we need to handle all the requirements with a single technology. So that is possible with private LTE. So the next one is the public safety, as we have already seen. This is coming under the public sector. So it's all more on the right side, so which is more demanding. And then public safety is very much important from the mission critical aspect point of view. That's why we say it's on high demanding. So basically, private wireless is able to handle the diverse requirements. So I think we should start looking into the private LTE and then start using it rather relying only on the Wi-Fi. Okay, this is another slide where we have touched upon the different verticals. What we could, Wi-Fi is able to handle day-to-day communications, more business-driven communications. So it's not that 3GPP-based 5G or LTE is going to wipe off Wi-Fi. No, the Wi-Fi is relevant for most of the day-to-day communications, and then we are only looking into the business critical and then mission critical type of a communication here. So if you see business critical, maybe it's more on control system. So they want to remotely control. Remotely control could be relevant for a safety, worker safety point of view. So they need to do it in a remote control, and then they want to make it digitized, and then to improve the productivity, they want to bring the automation. So all these things, they are looking into the control systems. So the control system is more business critical communications, where there are mining, airport, oil rigs, and then factories. Maybe I'll share few use cases what Nokia has been doing in these areas. And then the last one is more on the mission critical. When anything related to the citizen or human safety aspects, then that comes under the mission critical. So one is the train control, other one is more in public safety services. It could be in health, public health related use cases. And then the next one is the power plant, and then grid control. These are the more mission critical communications, lives at risk. So for those things, we need to move more towards using the 5G and then LTE. Even now, if you see, at least in the business critical, they were trying to use Wi-Fi. They have tried to use Wi-Fi and then they failed. But in the mission critical, they have not been able to use any of the technologies till now. So that's completely a new area where it could be satisfied only by 3GPP technologies. But in the business critical, we have tried it, but we have failed it due to certain requirements which we are not able to satisfy with the Wi-Fi. So as I have shown there, it's more an increasing level of guaranteed reliability, availability, security, and then performance. Availability and then reliability, if you see, it is all 5 nines, which we are looking more in the 3GPP technologies, more on Wi-Fi, which is only 2 nines. So that's one of the aspects which we need to look into it. And then performance is, as we have seen, the peak rates are really high in the 3GPP technologies. Okay, so let me just share a few on the business models on the end-to-end architecture, how it has been there. So one is the first one is more enterprise want to own their own autonomous wireless, where they want to operate themselves. They will buy the equipment from the vendor, and then they will integrate it, and then they'll start using it for their own purpose. So here, if you see, with LTE or a 5G small cells, which should be having an edge cloud. So till now, we have not touched the edge cloud. Edge cloud is an optional component of the private LTE. Even without that, we will be able to handle or provide the requirements. But here, the MEC is more an edge, mobile edge computing, and then the edge cloud, where it provides a platform to host the applications. It could be an enterprise-specific applications, which would be a latency-sensitive applications, where it could be at the edge and then able to provide the service. So one of the use case which I would like to show it later is maybe a video streaming. It could be a stadium use case, where they want to capture the video, and then they want to process it, and then immediately want to put it to the audience. So these type of use cases, it will be very much relevant where MEC or the edge cloud is needed. And then as we are more looking into the MI and then ML and then AI type of use cases, so most of those processing need to be done at the edge, where very near to the data capture. So the data capture is more going to be on the small cells than LTE, so where they will be having the processing at the premises or at the stadium, or it could be any of the event areas, and then we are able to immediately recognize for example, even for the utilities or any of the industry use cases, they need to take the actions within a fraction of a second. So in those type of things, even the processing capabilities are there at the edge. So that's the edge cloud. So, but that's an optional for a general requirements, and then that's going to be getting connected to the autonomous private wireless network, where they will be having the core network and then enterprise applications residing in their enterprise premises. So here, there is no CSP, or there is no external entity or external component is involved. So this is the autonomous wireless model. And then there is a second model. In all these cases, the radio is going to reside on the enterprise premises, where here, if you see, they can start using the operator's private wireless as a service network model, or an NDAC. NDAC is more in Nokia's cloud, where they are able to provide the core network, and then even the operations and maintenance as a part of the cloud. So here, if you see, that's a service which an enterprise can use it, and then they can even host their own applications within their premises by using the local breakout function. These are the two possible models what we have, depending on the knowledge of the enterprise. If the enterprise is able to run their own network, they can go for autonomous. If they are novice in the networking area, and then they want to focus on the use cases, I would say that it is better to go for using it as a service, mainly on the core side. Okay, so here I was trying to touch upon the few drivers and then enablers which are needed for the private LTE, and then how is it different. This is giving you, this we have already covered. Here, if you see, they are looking for a more robust wireless network, and then from a CSP point of view, what they are looking now. So till now, I was speaking about on the enterprise side. The CSP want to create a new revenue stream. So currently, they are having only the normal public users. So they are started looking for an extra revenue stream, which is going to come from the enterprise, and then that enterprise needs a private network for handling their own requirements. And then spectrum options, we have many different options. CSP are leasing a few spectrum which could be used by the enterprise. That's one option. And second one is the vertical spectrum. In last month, Germany was in Germany, they are leasing this particular spectrum only for enterprise use cases. So those things cannot be used by CSPs. So that's called a vertical spectrum. So that is one way of getting the spectrum option. And then the last one is what we have been speaking about, the Cbrs and then multifier, where it's an unlicensed LTE. so which we will be able to use it for the private LTE. So mainly the Cbrs alliance and the multifier is what we are looking for, an unlicensed spectrum usage. And then, as we have already seen, the connected industrial devices, machines, and then wearables, mainly on the UE side. As of now, we have around 2,500 different LTE devices only for industrial use cases. Rugged, so they have taken care of those things. So device ecosystem is really good for private LTE now, though we need to wait for 3 years for 5G to get the device ecosystem. But as of now, private LTE device ecosystem is really good. We have 2,500 models in that. And then mainly looking into the solutions. Yes, one is the LTE small cells. It's in compact one-box solutions. It could be an indoor or an outdoor. Depending on the use cases, the number of small cells will vary. And then the virtual MEC, which is an edge cloud, as I have been explaining in the previous cases. It's mainly an ultra-low latency. And then it's a low bandwidth processing. It need not all the way need to go to the core and then break out there. It could break out at the premises. And then the contextual relevant applications, which we could host that to the premises, which is relevant only for the that particular scenario or an event. If it's a stadium, then only the stadium relevant use cases I can host it in the MEC. It need not be hosted somewhere else on the internet. Then location awareness, depending on the location and then depending on the subscribers in that particular area, there are many applications which we could do. Maybe a targeted advertisements sort of an use cases. All those things could be hosted on the MEC. And then looking into the compact cloud core, this compact cloud core is there. It's in two different possibilities. One is there and running on the cloud. The other one, we could even host it in the MEC. So MEC could host even the cloud core. There was an example where we have been doing it for a military use cases. The whole network is there in the in the bag, so we can just carry it, the whole network at the backpack. So for that, so everything was there in the backpack. So that's the compact cloud core. These are the solutions what Nokia has, and then similar solutions are there with other vendors too. Okay. What are the verticals which are adopting the private LTE? If you see, the manufacturing is one of the main area which we have been having it, and then all the utilities and the mining, oil and gas is the energy sector, which they are mainly focusing on the private LTE. Logistics, and then public sector, and then transportation. Let me go through a few of the use cases in the next slide, but these are the verticals currently looking into the private LTE. Maybe the public sector, we can slightly keep it aside. That's going to be a nationwide type of a use case, but all other use case, maybe we can quickly look into it in the next slides. So we are, the Nokia is having a private LTE references alone with the external enterprises. The channels could be two. One is directly engaging with the enterprise. Other one is we are partnering with the CSPs and then going it through them. So here, if you see 50% or 60% of the use cases were through CSPs. So if you see from then energy and then resources point of view, it's and mineral plus bombas more. It is more from South America. There, it's in Peru. It's a mining field in Peru, which is 15th biggest mining in the world, and then they are doing it in million tons is their delivery capacity. It's a copper factory, which we have been delivering the private LTE. So the whole mining operations has been controlled by the private LTE. So that's an one reference which we have put it lately. And then if you see even the public sector, it's more an smart city project, which has been for Sendai City. And then even for the Nordic it's more like a smart city, and then public sector use cases we have been seeing. And then from the manufacturing point of view, we have already provided the BMW factory in China. It has been controlled for the manufacturing different use cases with a private LTE. So there are a few public references which is already listed there, but it's growing. We have started only in last 2-3 years on this enterprise. We are already 120. Every year we are adding around 40 references for this private LTE. Okay, so few use cases I have put it here. So one is on the oil extractions site. This is in Australia. It's an energy sector. It's an enterprise where we have used it there. So there they've been using it more for the sensors and then remote plant monitoring and then operations. So here they use the video surveillance also, and then they have been controlling the rigs from remotely, and then they have been checking it out from the sensors, how well it has been working, and then depending on that, they have been able to control it using the private LTE. And then second one is then the harbors, where they have been able to use the drones, and then also having a video surveillance to check how the containers have been moving, and then across the containers, they have completely reduced the human intervention, and then they're for one is due to the safety, and then due to the efficiency, they're able to do the business efficiencies using the private LTE. Here, if you see even the cranes and then trucks, they were able to do the geopositioning of the automatic vehicles. And then also the containers to handle the use cases. So that's the harbor use case. And then for the petrochemical is more from a worker safety point of view. They've been doing it and then improve the efficiency there. So it was able to cover, as we have told there, it is 37 kilometers square. The whole chemical plant, they are able to cover it. So they have been using for the critical communications and then also for the drone surveillance. So in the last use case, they have been using the MEC2 in addition to the small cells. So these are the three customer case studies what I have. And then I have two mainly for our Cbrs network. This is going to be the two use cases where we have used the Las Vegas Motor Speedway. So we showed a first live demo of the private LTE network over Cbrs, where it's going to be a virtual reality zone. So 360-degree video streaming provided in-car experience, where there was a 360-degree camera fitted into in the car, and then whoever is seeing, they were able to see that how a driver is going to visualize, and then what is the visuals from inside the car. It's going that much speed. So we were trying to mainly show the mobility aspect and then also the peak rate aspect from this particular use case. And then same way we have been also doing it for the industrial Internet of Things demonstrated a private LTE network with the Cbrs. And then I have, as I have told, there are 120 cases which we have been across the diverse industries. I've just left the link there, so we are able to look into it there too for a reference. Yep. And then just to conclude, we already have the private LTE available now, so we need to start using it instead of waiting it for private 5G. Even though there will be few use cases which needs really in lesser than or microsecond level latency. So for that, we need to wait for 5G, and then the peak rate, if we need more than few gigabits per second, we need to wait for 5G. Otherwise, we have the LTE now, we need to start using it for the enterprises. Thanks for the opportunity.
Great. Thank you, Swami. That was a very good recap to look at what private wireless networks could offer. And the fact that private LTE wireless is here, and that's what private 5G networks is going to basically ride on. The use cases that Swami presented kind of gave us a scope of what is private wireless networks being used for. And but here today we are going to look at a couple of use cases that have been provided to us by Cbrs Alliance. And the use cases that we are going to showcase right now are more local, with the Dallas Transit and for the Dallas Love Field Airport. So if we could get those videos up, we'd just like you guys to take a look at what's happening with CBRs right here at home in Dallas, Texas. Ongo is actually a service provided by CBRs Alliance. And that's what we are going to showcase here. So that's okay, you can get started.
The transit system in the Dallas Metroplex area is one of the largest in the United States. It has over 200,000 riders a day and over 93 miles of tracks. We're deploying upwards of 300 kiosks across the entire system, and one of the primary objectives of the system is to provide ubiquitous security at the stations, as well as integration with their ticketing systems and a full-featured system for wayfinding, community information, and news. With the huge and reliable backhaul we're able to provide to our kiosks via Ongo, it's all about information. They'll be able to get off the train, type into the kiosk exactly what they're interested in, and be able to find their way to it with wayfinding and other advanced services. Well, in addition to all the community service features, the kiosks, when they're not in use, display advertising. And this allows us to share revenue with the transit system so they can keep the cost of their ridership as low as possible. Ongo has done extensive testing to make sure the interoperability is there so that when you deploy equipment in your network environment, it's going to work reliably every time. That was a critical factor for our success in getting this happening across the transit system in Dallas. The technology that we're deploying in this installation is applicable to so many industries across the country. Ports, municipalities, airports, warehouse, distribution facilities, manufacturing facilities, they've all got a need to have private data secured and fast within their facility. And we're poised now to be able to deploy this same solution in literally thousands of locations across the United States. I'm just so excited to be a part of this initiative with the Ongo team, and I really can't wait to see where this technology takes us in the future. The potential is unlimited.
Anywhere you have a large group of people who need connectivity, the more you have, the better.
Well, at Love Field, we've been committed to really leading the evolution of the passenger experience. I think we're very excited and proud that we're first known major airport to deploy the Ongo technology.
Adding Ongo to the airport is going to increase capacity, have faster speeds, and lower latency.
We've really got to figure out a way to be able to let our passengers communicate with the outside world, as well as communicate with the airport, the airlines, and each other. We really look at our customers as 4 different kinds of customers. We have super travelers that breeze through the airport. We've got our business traveler who's experienced. We have the family traveler, which is a couple of parents and kids. And then last, we call them amazed that planes can fly. The key is tailoring a pathway for each of our different customer segments so that they get the best experience possible. When you find new spectrum and you have an opportunity really to access it and use it not only to deliver great service to your customer, but also to improve your internal operations, it's just a great new technology that we wanted to be a part of at the very beginning. Well, I think Ongo really is the future of these internal systems to safely and securely have our own communications infrastructure within the airport, which not only makes us safer, makes us a better airport, provides better service. That really is going to help us continue to deliver for that increasing demand.
How we envision OnGo is it's going to be part of the whole convergence of network connectivity. So licensed, unlicensed, and OnGo together is really a great solution.
Okay, great. Thank you. So those were use cases we were trying to showcase that's local to our Dallas area. I apologize for a scratchy throat today. Still recovering from the half marathon I ran this Sunday. So with that, I'd like to invite the panel over to the stage. And so we have Chris Stark, Chairman of the Cbrs Alliance, here with us, who is going to join us for this talk. Andrew Silver, CTO, CISO of Tango Networks, and Fawad Nouri, Associate Engagement Manager from Infosys. So as I welcome these folks on the stage here, Chris, actually, as we found out last time, really is the father of CBRS and has been instrumental in putting the Cbrs Alliance together with the OnGo services. We've got Andrew Silva here, who is the Chief Technology Officer and entrepreneur and inventor for Tango Networks. And Fawad Nouri, who is joining us from Infosys, and with his experience with clients as varied as AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, Sprint, and so on. We value his feedback with how their clients are actually looking to deploy private wireless networks and the use cases associated to them. So with that, welcome all of you. So as Swaminathan actually had shown us, the recap on private wireless networks. And how 5G would follow in its footsteps. I would like Chris here to actually talk a little bit about the OnGo services that you guys have launched. If you could tell us a little bit more about what it is, how it's being deployed, and who all are using it currently.
Sure. The whole concept around OnGo. So we originally had everything called the Cbrs Alliance, and the problem with calling it Cbrs Alliance and Cbrs Alliance Services or whatever is the terminology. The feedback to us was that the terminology wasn't very friendly towards verticals that weren't established in telecom. So if you looked at verticals in healthcare, in transportation or whatever, they didn't really resonate with that concept. So we came up with the idea that we would create the OnGo brand. And the concept around the OnGo brand is just that we create that brand of trust around whether it's 4G or 5G, but it's all around networking, wireless networking within a series of standards that we're developing so that it coexists. Devices all work. You can operate within a SAS and a radio and a series of CPEs, and you know when you put them together for any of those verticals that this is going to function. When we started it, obviously, lots and lots of the original work that was done was to try and ensure that all the technical pieces were really taken care of in terms of how LTE functions within the band, how we can have lots of different LTE networks all co-resident in a similar place. We moved on through what we call our business working group to look at where are we going to really impact this ecosystem. And we have the existing mobile operators inside the alliance, and clearly they're going to use the OnGo system. They're going to use it to add capacity to their networks and add feature functionality to maybe some of their enterprise plays. But we wanted to figure out how do we actually create value around verticals themselves? So we've outreached to a number of them. All of those we take feedback from and look at how do we actually present our solution, the OnGo solution to that. And where we can, what we've done is we've developed additional sort of technical work and so on, so that the OnGo brand really fits to where the end user wants to go. So to give you an idea, these business working groups, when we first started them, and I think we started them 2 years ago, we would struggle to get 5 or 10 people to turn up to those meetings. It was a real struggle because we were just so early in the cycle and everybody was really focused on the technology. The last one we had, which was in Austin in October, we had over 100 people turn up to the business working groups. A lot more interest now in not so much how this is going to work, because I think people are beyond that. They understand that that's taken care of. It's really about how do we create value for different networks, for different verticals and so on. And I think that's a really good place for us to be.
Thank you, Chris. So, Andrew, as far as Tango Networks is concerned, what is your play with specifically private wireless networks and CBRS?
So, I don't know if this is on. Great. So thanks very much for having me. We're a small company up in Frisco, and essentially what we are is a mobile operator that you've never heard of that runs our own private network that's connected to all of the major carriers around the world. So we operate in 191 countries. We have mobile service, and long before CBRS, our vision was to build what we call GPMN, Global Private Mobile Network. And so that's really what we've developed. So when you use our products, for example, and you turn on a mobile phone, it doesn't say AT&T or T-Mobile. Actually, I don't even know which network I'm on. It'll say Boeing, or it'll say the company that I'm using, or it'll say OnGo. And so essentially what we did is we had developed this concept of the Global Private Mobile Network for both actually for all 3 components of mobile networks, which are data, which is the one that is most prevalent in the CBRS use case, but also messaging and voice. And voice really is the forgotten killer app use case that we really focus on in Tango, because everybody has a mouth and an incessant need to use it, but it's really the forgotten use case that's necessary for business to operate. So when it came to CBRS, it was a natural fit for us. We actually had done this back in 2007 with a company called Strata 8 that had purchased licenses all over the United States, and we enabled them to offer private networks in buildings where they could connect their voice and data to that network. So when CBRS, it was a natural fit for our company to connect with CBRS Alliance. We became a member quite early on. And now what we enable is the ability to have a subscription controlled by the enterprise that works inside the facilities or the CBRS networks that are owned or operated by an enterprise or by a service provider, and also enable them to roam outside onto public mobile networks around the world and still have their voice, data, and messaging connected back into the enterprise.
That's very good. So a lot of these companies that are implementing BYOD, obviously, it's at a point where it's not talked about, it's not asked. But when employees bring in their own devices, would an offering such as yours actually help with the security and the other issues that they have been facing?
Yeah, so that is a whole hour topic unto itself. But the traditional concept of what BYOD is not actually BYOD. It's bring your own subscription that includes a mobile phone. In our model, it's truly bring your own device. One of the issues that the industry has struggled with overall is like the Apple iPhone has not really been able to be controlled through apps like Android phones and other devices. And so what our company did is we took essentially the simple way to think of it is we took the app out of the phone and we put that into the network. And our whole vision is the enterprise is the service provider. And so they can then control any device, including iPhones, because they're not controlling the device, they're controlling the network. So when it comes to bring your own device, you can bring whatever phone you want, but the subscription on the phone is the enterprise. Now, that then becomes the issue of, well, I've got my personal subscription and I've got my corporate subscription. And the reality, I mean, this is a whole long story, but the industry itself has sort of been forced to accept this concept of using consumer-based cell phones and consumer-based services for corporate use. Mm-hmm. And it's an unfortunate thing. It's the way the industry grew, and we're trying to bring that around. So the first set of companies that we are targeting are what we call the low-hanging fruit, are the companies that have been resisting this for years. The ones that say, look, I have a vertical industry need. I have to have all my calls recorded because I'm in the financial industry, or I need to have all my data integrated with Salesforce.com automatically, or I need to have cameras with high security, or all these kinds of things. Those are the companies that basically just walk in and they will be interested in a device that they hand to the employee and say, this is the corporate device. I gave you a desk phone. I gave you a laptop computer. Now here's your mobile phone. Once that's exhausted, then we start moving into the other use cases of dual subscriptions, and we have solutions for that where we can control both sides, we can separate them and all that. But the difference between our solution is we don't do that with software on the device. We do that from the network.
Okay, that's great. That's good to know. Actually, bring your own subscription. That's really true. I mean,
yep.
So my next question would be to Fawad. Fawad, with your work at Infosys, when you're working with clients and the use cases, what are the kind of use cases that you guys are seeing that you are helping them implement?
Thanks for the invitation here. Infosys has a quite large amount of enterprise clients. We do cater operators, but also outside operators, industrial clients and manufacturing. So I think the connectivity has become a critical part of their ecosystem. They want to utilize high bandwidth connectivity, and few things we are working on, which could be as simple as just getting the right data from a single sensor to the right point. And Wi-Fi is not helping them out because of congestion due to high noise floor, other aspects of it. So Infosys is looking in Cbrs as part of the technology where it could be deployed either indoor, outdoor for such operations, and to actually help them to bridge the gap. LTE and private LTE has been much more robust. It's much more reliable as it is, and it's much more getting more cheaper and accessible for enterprise to look into that aspect.
Okay, great. Yes, Swaminathan actually said in his presentation, when he compared the Wi-Fi to LTE networks, there's a significant performance available with private wireless LTE networks. Yeah. So with that, Chris, I'll come back to you. Obviously, we know that, with the availability of the spectrum, the value of the spectrum itself is dominated by demand. We understand the major carriers when they are choosing to go CBRS, but what about other players?
So look, I think with the spectrum piece, I think we've got a couple of things coming up. We're just about to go into full commercial deployment for CBRS. We expect that to either happen, it could even happen at the end of this year, if not beginning of next year, which means that general availability piece of CBRS, which anybody can play in, you've just got to hook up to a SAS, you don't need to go and buy the spectrum, that becomes available. And we see, obviously, all of the use cases that we've got at the moment are all in GAA. Coming up in the middle of the year, middle of June, is the PAL auctions. And I think that's where the value of the spectrum is going to get tested. As you said, I think if you look at it, the big MNOs know, they understand what they've got to do in terms of supplementing their spectrum portfolio and how much downlink supplements they need and so on. The part of it that's not really that well understood is how well are other people going to play in PALs, and what will drive other, whether it's the MSOs or whether it's a port or whatever it is, what will drive them to buy spectrum? And I think one of the beliefs that we certainly have got in the Alliance is that we've got a period now of about 3, 4, 5 months tops where we need to make sure that we get really good quality information into the marketplace so people understand what the opportunity is. They understand what the difference is between a PAL, what the difference is between operating in GAA, and let them make an informed choice. And before this, I was on a call with the Alliance, and one of our focuses for next year is clearly going to be a really big push to try and continue this business of communicating exactly what does it mean. I think events like this are important because the more information we can put out there, and obviously thank you to Swami for the presentation that Nokia came and did, but the more information we can get out there, the more we can get into the hands of the non-traditional guys about what they can use it for, how do they equate this spectrum to a business opportunity and a value. I think that's what we need to do at this point. I do think there's a ton of things coming up at the moment that make the whole business of how do you use the spectrum, how do you value it, somewhat daunting for new users. And I think it is incumbent upon all of us to try and demystify that as fast as we can. My real concern is that we miss the opportunity in the next 4 or 5 months to do that. And then we go into the auctions and people come out at the other end and miss it, suddenly wake up to understand why it's important to them, and then it's all too late. So I think this is sort of a real critical period for us all, to just for the US economy, to make sure that opportunity is well understood, and understood in their terms, not in ours, because I think that's the other problem.
Right. So with GAA, general access, which is the unlicensed spectrum, people can play in that, see how it works for them. But how do they figure out that there is an opportunity, and there is, what differentiates the opportunity for them to go and apply for a license?
I think there's a number of different variables in there. If you're in GAA, you have to understand that you're going to play with everybody else. It's not like Wi-Fi. It isn't an unlicensed band. It's a managed band in the sense that everybody is controlled underneath a spectrum access system. Everybody, the coexistence between players is all controlled. So you're in a managed environment, but you're in an environment anybody can join. And there isn't actually, I don't believe, a rule that says there's a limit to the number of people that can join. So you have to understand that. The PALs give you an opportunity to actually have a certain amount of spectrum that you get to create a QoS or a service level agreement or whatever it is you want to do inside that spectrum. But that's in our terms. I think in their terms, it's whether they can create a business outcome that's meaningful for them, whether it's a critical public safety outcome or whether it's some sort of factory automation outcome or whatever. But that's where I think lots of education, lots of conversations with enterprise, and I think the guys that are sitting here, some of the other people that you've had talk, I think it's so important that we get into the meat of that in the sort of first quarter, 4 months of next year.
Okay. So as far as Tango Networks is concerned, Andrew, are you guys looking to apply for PAL for your enterprise networks, or how are you planning to go about that?
So it's a good question. So right now we're probably not. We're focusing more on the public network, and really what we're doing is we're enabling enterprises and building operators, companies that want to light up their networks, to be able to have this seamless capability of having voice, video messaging, and data inside and ubiquitously outside. But it's not out of the question. It's something that we're thinking about. It's just it can become an expensive proposition to set it up. On a nationwide basis. You may pick up certain pockets in certain areas.
I see.
One of the things that we sort of have to keep in mind is that the mobile operators, the incumbents, the big guys, are likely or may end up either buying some of the PAL licenses themselves, or if not, they're going to be putting coverage into the major locations, the big stadiums, the large office buildings and complexes where they really do need to improve their coverage. And then there's the secondary, smaller buildings and smaller campuses where they're not necessarily going to go in. And those are the opportunities for companies like you saw up there, Landmark, and a whole slew of others that are going to come in. And those companies and campuses, universities and all sorts, and manufacturing facilities that want to set up their own, like Swami was pointing out in his charts, they're not necessarily going to have the know-how and the ability to build out and operate their own networks. And so companies like ours will be able to help them by providing them a SIM card that will operate on the infrastructure that they purchase within their confines.
So you guys would actually help them apply for the license. Is that what?
If they want, or they don't have to, they can just go GAA.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, what we're providing is a network-based infrastructure, essentially like a SIM card for them, that can be programmed on their private networks that they own and operate themselves under their own rules. And in addition to that, we give them the ability to go out onto the public network. And when they're out in our proposition, they're still technically connected to their private network anywhere in the world. That's kind of the proposition. Some companies are only going to want to use that inside their facility. And there are certain use cases for that. It's a limited set of use cases, but certainly there are. Traders that utilize their mobile devices on a trading floor, it only works inside the trading facility. But there's a lot of usage that's going to be, I have to go inside and outside, and I need to have the voice, the messaging, and the data secured and controlled in accordance with the regulations that my company has set up.
I see. Okay, that's great. So Fawad, what are the kind of discussions you guys are having with your clients with regard to CBRS and being able to license it? Are you seeing your customers looking at licensing PAL for their own private needs, or how do you see the trend with the diverse set of clients you guys have?
So I'm going to add to what Chris was mentioning, the part where currently I'm educating the sales force of Infosys themselves, as Infosys is a global company, and things of private network is coming up in UK by Ofcom, in Germany, and in US with CBRS. So I'm trying to educate them that this is a critical aspect where enterprise would be looking into that and how this would apply for their either PAL license or GA license. This is something to have a dialogue about. The second part means when I'm speaking to enterprises where they're raising this question about, okay, what's the best part to suit? I think we're trying to play an independent technology consulting, trying to give them a vision of what is that their requirement they have today and where they want to be in future. So based on that, we tell them what could be the right way part. It's their decision to take and how they want to take it forward. So these are both our existing clients and new clients that we're looking into.
Yeah. So when I look at this, obviously there's a role for integrators, but I see a unique proposition for Infosys to be able to basically become the independent consultants that you're talking about. And quite frankly, I'm in a big onus to educate the non-traditional industries about the aspects and the significance and the advantages of going private wireless. So Swami actually mentioned in his presentation about vertical spectrum, which is a dedicated spectrum that's only for enterprise. But there is something else that's brewing up with the FCC where they are going to open up the C-band spectrum. How do you see the C-band once they are able to remove some of the incumbents like the satellite companies and the C-band spectrum here in the US? How do you see C-band auction impacting CBRS?
So maybe I'll go first. so spectrum price, so spectrum valuation, and the people who want to buy it are driven by scarcity of the resource, and C-band changes that significantly. I mean, I see there's propositions from 280 megahertz all the way up that could be available. When you look at 5G networks, which is where I think we're really thinking about when we talk about C-band, when you look at 5G networks, carriers in the main would like to have 100 megahertz plus of spectrum available to go ahead and do 5G networks. Now, I say 100 megahertz plus because I think you're seeing in some countries they're getting 200 megahertz of spectrum available for 5G. So I think if C-band does come into the market next year, the way that the FCC are proposing, and we see big chunks of continuous spectrum available for purchase for 5G networks, it will change the dynamic on which the PALs get auctioned, because I think you may end up seeing people waiting for the C-band auctions, not necessarily being as aggressive in the PALs, but waiting to see and trying to take chunks of the C-band. So I think C-band has the impact on that. My expectation is that what you'll end up seeing is C-band ends up getting used in the way the large carriers would deploy 5G. So predominantly, my feeling is it will be predominantly a consumer first strategy, probably supplemented by other industries as they sort of branch out. But it's certainly a little bit of what we're seeing elsewhere. So, if you see that happen, then maybe there's an opportunity for the PALs to start becoming a lot more affordable for people in small areas. Because don't forget, the PALs are going to be auctioned on county areas. So although they're not quite as small as the original idea of census tract, they're still reasonably manageable areas. So maybe if that comes to fruition, maybe we see a few other people come in that we hadn't seen before. I think one of the things that doesn't really help the industry at all is when we get people buying the spectrum and not putting it to use. That's clearly detrimental to the overall ecosystem. The one thing about Cbrs and this band is that if somebody buys a PAL and sits on it, everybody else can go in and use it just like it was GAA. So, if it's not lit up and it's not carrying service, you don't really have any protection against everybody else coming and using it. And I think it was the best sort of outcome that we could get at the time to try and ensure that the spectrum became useful as fast as we possibly could. And I do think that's a big deal. I think it also will play a part when it comes to how do the auctions for PALs go ahead, because if you're going to spend all that money for a 10-year license or whatever it turns out to be, if you're not going to light it up for the first few years and everybody else is going to use it, maybe you think twice about exactly what the value is to you. So, I hope that the rules that are put in place that we worked on to create these PALs sort of help facilitate deployment and help facilitate action, which I think is what everybody wants. And I think that, when it comes to the valuation of the PAL and who will be in there buying, I do think there's a lot around what else happens about C-band and some of these other auctions. We shouldn't lose sight of the fact there's a ton of millimeter wave spectrum being auctioned right now and has been up until now. So, there's a lot of different pieces of spectrum the FCC's been putting out there. There's so much appetite in the market. I think it's a good time, as I say, for people to understand what the opportunity might be. And I don't want to end up repeating myself several times here, but that's one of the reasons I do firmly believe that sort of the next 3-4 months, it's about getting out to your customers. It's about trying to make sure that they understand what exactly can be done here and what it means to them, and trying to raise that sort of understanding as fast as we possibly can.
Okay. So you're saying basically the C-band will not compete with PALs, but is going to spur, in fact, different use cases that would require PAL?
Yeah, I think it could. I mean, I think the nice thing about C-band is right adjacent to CBRS. So you're now looking at a band of spectrum between 3.5 and 4.2 when you put them together. So from a radio, from a device and everything else, it starts to become more understandable how all that ecosystem is going to build. So I think that could have a positive impact. And yeah, it could well be that we start seeing C-band driving some, with the people who buy that, driving some ideas around how to create value, and that filters down into the CBRS. I don't think that's out of the question.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So Andrew, my next question would be to you, given this response from Chris. How important is the amount of spectrum available? I mean, how important is it that some of the clients you guys are servicing in Tango Networks, that the amount of spectrum is a tangible limitation, or it is an asset that they want to invest in?
So let me give you, I'm going to give you the two sides of the argument, and then I'll sort of show you where I kind of fit. But in essence, we've got sort of this, I think overall in the industry, sometimes we forget. So you have two sides. One side of the argument is that we've had such a limitation in spectrum, and now these bands are becoming available, and there's tremendous opportunity and for all these use cases now to be brought to market. The other side of that equation is that what we often forget is that from the time when spectrum allocation was put into place, the technologies that were allocated were very inefficient. And so now every time we release a small band, what seems like a small band, we have such efficient technologies today that are evolving so fast. If you just take, for example, like narrowband IoT that uses just such a small sliver, when just releasing what we are releasing in CBRS is a phenomenal band of usage. And so I sometimes worry a little bit that we may be the auctions may be coming out a little bit early before we start using GAA and getting it out there so that people get educated and realize this scarce, start using this resource to the point where it becomes scarce, and that adds value to a PAL license opportunity. And so when you open up C-band, if you take that argument, it becomes an even bigger equation there. Again, there's two sides of it, but the other side of it is that when you open up these bands, we have new use cases that can take advantage of high bandwidth opportunities that we could never do before, even combined with our efficient coding techniques. So.
I see. So you mentioned narrowband IoT, and I think that was some of the discussion actually just before the event. Fawad and I were talking about some of the use cases your clients are working on. You said they were very simple in nature. Yeah. Are they mostly in the IoT domain?
Yeah, the discussions in the industrial space is started with the IoT domain, as they are looking at Industry 4.0 at what's from Nokia mentioned, where they're looking into utilizing how can I digitize my life cycle of production or reduce the OPEX. But the part where is that the data is small in the initial stage, but then they have an ambition to grow it, put more data streaming or data output from those same devices or same aspect of it to digitally control, even having, I was amazed by visiting a factory which currently is operating 24/5, but they have a vision to 24/7 operations and even remote operations, something which I think was in movies mentioned as robots, part of it, digitally operation manufacturing floors. So I know IoT is pretty robust technology for the LTE. In CBRS, this is something I think as it develops and comes into the play, it will get significance and would be looked at as one of the options to be used by industrial clients.
Okay. So with that said, Chris, what are the dates for the PAL auction, and when is the C-band going to be made available?
So the PAL, so the FCC has declared that the PAL is going to be mid-June. I think it's around June 24th, something like that. The C-band, they took an action to get the C-band into the market by the end of next year. Now, that looks a really tough ask from where they are at the moment. But lots of pressure is being applied to the FCC to make that happen. So I think, go back to what I said. I think if the C-band does come in at the end of the year and the FCC are successful in plotting the course to that, then that 6-month gap between when the PALs will get auctioned and the C-band probably will impact exactly how aggressive people want to be when it comes to PALs. So I think these things do have a knock-on effect. There's only so much appetite for purchasing licensed spectrum. I don't think it's unlimited. And so, from that, again, I think, will it bring other people into the market? I think the trouble is, and maybe this is really reiterating what Tango was just said, is that, time is not on our side because sort of the auctions are happening fairly close on to when GAA was actually available. And so from that perspective, the cycles of learning are going to have to be pretty quick. And, people don't take a massive decision about buying spectrum without a huge amount of due diligence. So it looks tight. It looks really tight to see lots and lots of people come in. The only piece that I did see that is in the rules, and I think will help, is in CBRS, the concept of sub-licensing is there. So we may yet see a secondary market for spectrum, which could also then follow on and create these opportunities. So I don't think it's all or nothing in mid-June, but at the same time, you do look at it and think, wow, it'd be nice if we could try and sort of educate as much of industry as we possibly can about what the opportunity is.
Right. So the GAA actually became available in September this year?
So the GAA became available as initial commercial deployments, which means that you have to file the plan with the FCC, and then it gets blessed and so on. So although lots of plans were filed, it's a little restrictive in terms of how you go out and deploy. Once you get into full commercial deployment, you really only have to worry about registering with the SAS to start operating. So it's sort of the shackles come off and away we go. So I think that, getting to full commercial deployment, getting going on that, again, has always been something that I've pushed with the FCC and NTIA and the Department of Defense, was to try and get that going as fast as we possibly could. For lots of reasons. One was we just wanted to get into 2020 with certainty for people about the availability of spectrum. But the second was, in my mind, with the back of my mind, was the more runway we can create for people to build networks, to get to grips with what the opportunity is, the more understanding again comes back to what's the value of this opportunity would be. So continue to push that. And continue to be somewhat hopeful that we're only a month or so away from that happening. But anyway, that's really been the fundamentals of where we've been trying to drive.
I see. So just to go back to something that Andrew actually said, and it kind of struck me. Voice is the simplest use case, right? And it's a forgotten use case. How do you see that? I mean, you guys focusing on voice at Tango Networks, aligning that with all the natural language processing that's going on, carrying the voice of the users to maybe it's Alexa's mech or, the edge computes for. So how are you guys aligning the voice use case to something like that?
So great question. So first of all, we in Tango, we focus on all of it. But I have a particular love for voice just because I think it's been forgotten, and it's such an important use case when you look at large campuses and just the way business operates. So yes, we have a need for data, but we also have to make sure that we don't lose this voice. And voice has improved significantly in its coding and efficiency. You know, it's a multi-base now and all that. But one of the important areas is what you're bringing up, which is this natural language capability where we take human questioning and we turn that into compute power. And it can be based on cloud computing inside an enterprise, but it could also be in the cloud itself. What we do in Tango is we enable that channel to be opened, guaranteed, whether you're on your private network or on your public network, and we enable the enterprise to decide where to send that for compute. So you can, for example, differentiate between having certain queries being sent to private networks where private compute will engage with it, and then you can also separate out to public compute for your typical Google searches and things like that. So it's very, we see an important need for enterprise to take control of their own networks. And that's why we have that motto of the enterprise is the service provider. The enterprise has always been able to control fixed voice. The enterprise has always been able to control data within their enterprise. Just like in here, all the data goes through the campus corporate network. Now what we're doing is we're literally just taking the voice and the data and messaging from this device and plugging that back into their controlled environment and letting them make the decisions on how to handle that. So absolutely.
Yeah, that's vital. That's vital, especially in this day and age, especially with data security, the issues with Facebook and the data they're sharing there. So it's just very interesting. Now, voice has become the interface. It's almost like a cycle. Things keep coming back in new forms. And it's basically, companies like Tango Networks that basically looks at the value proposition of something that's just that simple and continue to work on it in different scenarios. But very, very good. Yeah.
Yeah. Just, when we started CBRS, actually one of the things I was worried about, I was really worried about voice services, partly because it was about having an ecosystem of handsets that worked on the band. I was worried about the complexity and some of the regulation issues around voice. And I wondered if that was a strong play for us. And we actually spent the first period of time thinking more narrowly about the sort of use cases. I think one of the things that we did see, and credit to yourselves and others that have done this, is that once we got this into the open, people went and knocked down some of the problems that we got in our heads, and went and created that opportunity. I mean, there was another one that we had in our minds about whether, in fact, it was going to be possible to have some sort of first responder or whatever network on this band because of the nature of the spectrum, and maybe whether, in fact, you could see interruptions or whatever. But again, it's fascinating to see people go and take that, and they've created solutions that make it work. And so I think when you go back and say, what was this? This was an innovation band. I think Tango are absolutely right. There's a sort of need for voice. There's a demand for it, and so on. And lots of the thoughts that we had about limitations that would be in CBRS, they and others have gone away and knocked them down. And I think that again, somehow you want to make sure that people understand that this is all happening, because that's what's generating opportunity in this market.
All right, so that's truly an innovation band,
because people have gone away and taken what we originally thought would be fundamental problems and figured them out, and that sort of stuff is I think in our wildest dreams that was really what we'd hope would happen, it isn't just this particular example. I've seen it in a number of places, and I think it's fantastic. I just think that the trouble is that we've got this really narrow sort of view at the moment, unfortunately, because of our ability to try and get a wider audience on all this. And that's what we've got to try and do now.
Right. And that's what's exciting to me. You know, all the new ideas that are coming out, technology-wise, just the use cases itself. But obviously, you know, we also need evolving business models to go along with it. I mean, as a technologist, we're always very excited about how we can use something in a new way. But for it to stick, I think it's really about the right ROI and the right business models. So hopefully in the next event that we have on the series, we'll focus more on the business aspect of the technology. In consideration of time, I'd like to actually open up to Q&A to the audience here. We do have folks online that we can take questions from if they would send it over a chat channel. And so do we have a microphone for folks? Any questions here in the audience?
There's one over there.
We're talking about demystifying kind of this area. What is one of the things or ideas or dreams that you guys would want to see CBRS bands, LTE kind of used for? So to kind of like, I guess, make the idea of networking kind of tangible to the everyday consumer.
You go first.
So I think I'll take some points. What Chris mentioned means the CBRS started to be an innovation band, and personally I see this as a critical aspect for not consumers, but also it's for enterprise and the ecosystem players that actually struggle with connectivity, the unreliability of Wi-Fi or other connectivity that they struggle with, and they see the connection or the data is so critical nowadays that they want to utilize machine learning, AI, and aspects of it. So they see that as, and this is just awareness, sharing that awareness, how this could be benefiting them. What is the ROI, as you mentioned, could benefit not just today, but how things can open up in the future. Utilizing AR, VR aspect of it much more easily, that could be a bottleneck for a Wi-Fi system. I think the vision I see means campuses, universities, that's another aspect of it. Hospitality is already using it. I heard few use cases in other events. I heard that they are using it already. So, and that's where I see it's going to be much more innovative. And it's just sharing that awareness and giving them the information or awareness of that this is not so complex. This is not as complex as it used to be for an operator to manage a network. This is a very simple and easy manageable aspect into another simple ecosystem that they can tag along to their existing IT ecosystem or any other system.
So that's great. Just to add on to that, the vision that we've always had, sort of the dream, has been to really bring mobility to, we're laser focused on enterprise, but it's really to bring the control of mobility down a level from the incumbents, from mobile operators. And so, this all started many years ago when I worked for a company called Ericsson up in Canada, and I was given a cell phone. We had a limited number of phones. I went across the border into the United States, and I made a phone call to my boss in Sweden, and I got the bill, and it cost $10 to connect and $7 a minute that day. And I got in big trouble. And ultimately, I could not understand why my company was not able to control this device the way they could control every device inside my office, my desk phone, my computer, and all that. And that really was the genesis for moving to this concept of global private mobile networks. And the vision that CBRS is bringing to us is finally these enterprises are now been given the opportunity to have the same power that mobile carriers have within their confines, and they've been given this privilege that nobody else can take away from them. They have the right as much as anybody else to gain access to that resource and control it the way they want. And ultimately, if you look at the long-term vision, like I said, we're focused on enterprise, but where it really is going to go ultimately is to the consumer long-term. And it's not going to be companies like mine. It'll be companies like Google, Amazon, Facebook that will ultimately take over control and enable consumers to be able to be the service provider for themselves. So the long-term really is, are we going to continue to pay money to incumbents that provide access today, or are we going to end up shifting that to paying the money to services providers that allow me to control what I want? And that's my belief.
So actually, I'll go back to something Rashmi started with. When we put CBRS, it was create abundance and create ease of use. That in itself isn't really where we want to be. What really is the mark of whether we've created innovation and the sort of environment we want is whether we see the applications coming, because that's generally where the value comes. And if we start seeing investment in companies that do applications that can get used on this platform, then I think and that comes in scale, I think that's a really good mark of the fact that we succeeded. I worry that, lots of the model at the moment for private networking or whatever is the people go into an enterprise and say, what do you want? And the enterprise has to say, well, I want whatever. So they go away and develop it for them. And then they come back with the bespoke solution and say, here's a solution, it's $1 gazillion or whatever it is. Instead of the fact that just like everything else, you've got bugs of choice about what you could do in terms of applications and outcomes, because people are out there developing because they know that there's a general ecosystem that can play on, they can play on and create the value for the end user. And I think that, in my mind, is a big deal in terms of whether we've created the sort of innovation that I think the US government wanted us to do at the beginning, and I think what we wanted to do. Lots and lots of applications, lots of companies thinking really differently about verticals and how do you create value in them. That to me would be fantastic. That would sort of be the epitome of success for us.
Thank you. Any other questions in the audience here? Do we have anything online coming in? Are we set up for that? Okay. So I guess with that, this was a really great discussion. I like the fact that we could get into some of the nitty-gritties and flow with the conversation. And I hope that we continue to have these conversations, just to help with the advocacy and the education piece of it. On behalf of Innovate5G and UTD, we thank UTD for providing us the venue for this, and Asterisk that is actually handling all our audiovisual needs today. Thank you to Chris, Andrew, and Fawad. Thank you for your time, for coming in and having this conversation with us. Thank you, Swaminathan, for your excellent presentation. It's great to actually look at the apples to oranges comparison there between Wi-Fi and LTE. I think that was one of my questions in the last event, was compared to Wi-Fi, how does LTE perform? And I think that was answered by your presentation today. So thank you very much. We continue to have this conversation. We will have another part to the same series where we continue to talk about different aspects. We also want to talk about some of the challenges. So we may have an event just addressing different challenges that people have, that clients and enterprise are facing. And hopefully we'll bring some enterprise companies in here to talk about those.
Excellent.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris.